Athlete Builder back at it. It's the Jim and Jim show today. As always, we're brought to you by the AEA Institute and the Mental Edge Academy Performance Software. Hit me up if you want to learn more about that. That's what we're going to be about. Today we have my guy Jim Artman, Army Ranger, sniper, business owner, author, all around good dude. Shout out to Alex Rogers. When this episode drops, Alex Rogers' his episode will have dropped about 3 or 4 weeks prior. So we had him on, and Alex is a super cool dude. He said, hey, talk to my guy Jim. He helped me out a lot. I think you guys would vibe pretty well. So we bring on Jim Artman, author of the Hero Transformation Program, co-founder of Extreme Resilience, that personal development brand where they're working with people. He and his teammate. He has a. What's great about Jim is that he has a process. He has a plan, and he's been through enough things where he's lived it, so he can talk the talk and walk the walk. So, Jim, welcome to the Jim and Jim show today.
Thanks for having me, Jim. Glad to be here.
Yeah, for sure. Working with Alex, cool dude, right? Jiu-jitsu guy. Been through a whole bunch of things. He's been through a bunch of deployments. He's a SEAL. You've been through deployments. You coach him at all? Like physical training, mental training, both, or just kind of like work together on a couple different things.
Well, we actually connected on LinkedIn,
Okay.
honestly, and I think he was working with like the Honor Foundation, and I think the military, especially the special operations community, has done a lot better job than when I was in, which I got out in 2012. But they've done a lot better job at engaging guys when they're getting ready to get out, when they're about a year out, kind of leaning on them like, what are you going to do, what's your plan, and connecting them to veterans on the outside. And so he kind of understood the assignment, I guess, and we connected on LinkedIn and had a good long conversation. He's a great dude. When I spoke with him, I think he was about 30 days from getting out of the military, and so I just wanted to be there to support him, let him know like, hey, it's going to be weird for a while, expect that, and just try to help him have at least a little bit softer place to land, because it is a little bit of a shock when you get out, especially being in a special operations community where standards are high, the mission is clear, task and purpose is crammed up your ass. But then when you get out, it's like, okay, now what? But he's been doing great, man. He's had a mission. He's in school. He's doing great with combat jiu-jitsu and getting some of his own fights going, and working as a coach with us. So that's really cool.
Awesome. A couple things there, in the athlete builder model, and it's not just my model, but others, one of the components is teammates. And whether you connect, like you guys haven't met each other at all in the military, but you met afterwards, via LinkedIn, then can you work together? And success leaves clues. And if you find someone else who has some experiences that you haven't had, but you want to, find that person, whether it's a coach or mentor or just a friend, and befriend that person to get some advice. Once you have that information, then you can, move forward. And then you talk about mission and purpose, having that next why, which is hard. People and their identity get interwoven with their activities, whether it's their job or their sport or their unit. Take that away. You have a career-ending injury, you get fired from your job, you finish your deployment, and you don't re-up. You have to answer that question, now what, which is oftentimes the title of most of my speeches. Now what? Because whatever we talk about today, if you don't do anything, hey, you got a little bit smarter, but what do you do next? Well, how do you put things into motion next? So that's a huge thing. And there's a number of things I want to get into with you. Being co-founder, writing a book, so I wrote a book. I want to find out what that was like. But I wrote down that your teammate with your business is named Chris, and you met on MTV's The Challenge. Is that right?
No,
No.
no. We didn't meet on the challenge. We actually met at a business accelerator program in Kansas City that's hosted by Wes Bergman,
Okay.
who was on the challenge several
Okay.
times. And so yeah, it's called The Blocks, and it's kind of like it was all filmed for like a show, and it was like kind of the mix between Real World and Top Chef, where like but for business. And so we're all living in a big house together, drinking from a fire hose every single day on like digital marketing, SEO, fundraising, and then competing against each other and business knowledge. So that's where Chris and I met. We were both doing completely different businesses then, but we had a shared passion for personal development, mental health. Both of us had been through some things ourselves. His dad was a retired Navy chief, did 30 years in the military. Yeah, after it was a few years later, we had stayed in contact. I actually had shut my previous business down to move to North Carolina, and that's when we started Extreme Resilience.
Gotcha. How did the show go for you guys?
I mean, it was all right. I think a lot of us like to believe that we were like pre-famous, but I don't know how well that show is really taken off. I think it's a lot more difficult to get things on some of these streaming platforms like Netflix and Amazon.
Did you learn anything from the experience?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was as Wes would probably refer to people as kind of like a space cadet when it came to digital marketing and how to do that when I first got there. And so that was probably like 2016, 2017, maybe 2017 when we went and did that. So since then, yeah, I've developed those skills quite a bit.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you and Chris worked together on a new project, Extreme Resilience. Walk me through how that whole idea came to be.
Well, actually, initially, we had discussed, well, he kind of came to me wanting to maybe put out some supplements because I'm kind of a nerd when it comes to supplements, nutrition, molecular biology, functional medicine stuff. But that didn't last long because that's a very saturated marketplace. Trying to get any kind of supplement products off the ground without having, well-established organic audience just seemed like, impossible. So we kind of took a step back from that to look at like, well, who is our audience? What is our philosophy? What do we believe in? What do we want to rally people around? And that's kind of how the personal development brand of Extreme Resilience came to be. Our company motto kind of speaks to what you were talking about earlier, is to own your purpose. And looking at my own experiences and, that of especially the veteran community, also first responder community has a lot of similarities. A lot of those people are veterans. Basically anybody that's very high performing, we can assume that we've all experienced some kind of trauma at some point in our life. So, when we say own your purpose, it's, it's one thing to be able to identify what your purpose is, right? Especially if you're transitioning from one career to another. But to be able to step into those shoes and actually own it is a whole other thing. And so that is the premise for, our philosophy of coaching and working with our clients is we use a holistic approach. I think that it is really the minimum effective dose is that holistic approach, because none of, mental, physical, spiritual, or environmental wellness kind of operates in a vacuum. If, you can be mentally tough at pushing yourself through a workout, but how's that mental toughness coming into play in your ability to manage relationships, or work through, we shifted from products to let's build an audience and a community around this idea. And one of the first things we did was create the Hero Transformation Program. And it's unique. It came from basically, tons of research and looking into resiliency and realizing there was no like real consensus on how you would define resilience, because it really matters who you're talking about, right? Like resilience for some inner city kids in Brooklyn means something way different than indigenous tribes in Australia, veterans, women, different races, cultures, things like that. So I kind of had to go out and create something that I felt would be well suited to our community and dealing with the specific struggles that most people have, especially veterans and first responders or people that are pushing themselves to perform at a high level, to include business owners. So, looking at mental, physical, spiritual, environmental wellness is like, 4 areas that are all going to be, those are all 4 areas that we have some level of control over, right? We can curate an environment that supports our wellness and supports our goals. Many people have heard you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, right?
True. Yep.
Cluttered workspaces, all those types of things. What kind of cleaning products are you using? What are you putting on your body? And ultimately, we are a big tube. If you were to stretch out the surface area of our digestive tract, it's about the same square footage of a tennis court. So that puts the tube that goes through us as our biggest interface with our environment. So going back to like, what do we have control over? That's kind of what I focus on is, I've created a survey that allows everyone we work with to kind of do an audit of resilience characteristics in those areas. And then to sort of operationalize it, because I don't have people fill out surveys to collect data, right? It's literally for them as a self-assessment tool. Then I have them audit their life through the lens of their health, earning potential, relationships, and opportunities. Like, how well are you applying those mental, physical, spiritual, environmental wellness strategies to those 4 areas of life? Because those are all 4 areas that everybody cares about. So, yeah.
In a nutshell, it's comprehensive, right? You want to work internally with what they're consuming, externally with what they're doing with their bodies, relationships, who they're around. Because not only are you the product of the 5 people you hang out with, you're a product of which hemisphere you live in, the work in which you do. You're a product of your childhood, and all that plays into it. So we're hit with stimulus at all points of the day in all different ways. That's why I like the mental performance side of coaching and training as the physical side, because you can't have one without the other. Because the mental piece drives everything, but just like you said. When you're growing up, I know you played some sports. You go into the Army, you end up being an Army Ranger, very physical. Then you're a sniper after that. You deploy as a sniper too, so again, there's the physicality of it. Just sitting still is a physical endeavor, right? And there's consistent adversity, whether you're playing at a high level in sports. And it's one reason we have athletes on, coaches on, military folks on, because there's so much crossover with the lessons learned. I got to believe as you are deployed over these years, you got to be thinking in the back of your head, because you mentioned now what? At some point, you're like, well, I'm not going to be in this for 20, 30 years. I'm not going to be a lifer. What might I do when I come out? It's probably percolating in the back of your head. You had some different ideas. You started a different business. Then you met up with Chris, and this kind of came together. Would you say that that time and deployment, the ups and the downs, help shape what you're doing now and kind of built that identity and that process of, hey, these are problems that we all face. We've got to have some solutions so that one, we just stay alive because suicide rate is a very high thing in the military, and also just not just survive but learn to thrive because we're only here once, so might as well see what we can do. Talk about how that whole thought process, because I also read in your biography, you're a big nerd like I am. Talk about genes and molecular biology, yuck. Epigenetics, yuck, right? But those are important things, right? So I like nerd stuff, but my God, right? So I'm glad there's people like you that can distill it down for me. But talk about how that hero's journey of yourself, of how you got to this point where, I'm putting all these things together and making this new product, this new service.
Well, several things came to mind. One is, kind of starting with like growing up in First Ranger Battalion. That's a hard place to exist. But I think I graduated RIP on my 19th birthday. So, when I showed up and everybody's already gone, it was rough. It was a tough place to be. And so, often you're faced with that sound in your head that makes you want to quit. And everybody that you're surrounded by is a heavy hitter, and there's an expectation to be able to continue to exist there that you're going to put in the work, right? So nobody's going to do that for you if, you're only putting in the work like during PT with your squad. Like, that's not enough, right? So you either figure out how to have personal accountability, for all those things, and be able to ignore those quit sounds in your head, because you learn, pretty quickly that your body can do a lot more than what your brain is trying to tell you can, and so, putting in lots of reps with that, eventually that sound in your head gets a lot quieter. But the personal accountability piece, I think, is really big and stuck with me. So that's one thing. As far as getting into the science, studying molecular biology, functional medicine, a lot of that, a good piece of that came from, I think, my intrinsic appreciation for self-reliance. I've always valued being somebody that can handle things, be resourceful, be self-reliant. And when I was working at sniper school, running stalk lanes and stuff, I see a lot of mushrooms in the forest, and so that kind of goes along with that. Like, I started reading books and studying mycology and understanding how to go out and forage for food. And, studying the science of mushrooms was really fascinating to me. And it was about that same time that I discovered permaculture. And for those who've not heard of permaculture, it literally means permanent agriculture. And it's a system of growing food that mimics nature. An example I like to give that makes it pretty clear is like, if you imagine a forest, like nobody's out there watering stuff, fertilizing anything, yet there's, incredible biodiversity and everything is thriving. So it's paying attention to nature and, kind of mimicking how ecological systems kind of achieve that balance through nitrogen fixing species, other species that attract pollinators. And without getting too far in the weeds in that, I just thought it was really cool. I'm like, why is everybody not doing this? So, my version of the American dream was go out and study, the fundamentals of science. So that way I wasn't just regurgitating what other people said, but I truly understood how to build soils, how to grow fungi, how to grow food sustainably and healthy, and teach it to other people. And that just sounded like a lot of fun for me. The functional medicine piece didn't really grow until after I was in college and started experiencing some pretty bad PTSD symptoms. It was at that point I was working at a nutrition store, learning, how all these different vitamins work and minerals and their mechanism of action, and dealing with some pretty bad depression, and, stuff like that. And I discovered Mark Hyman's book, The Ultra Mind Solution. And man, it was like an incredible aha moment. It just really lined up with how I feel, the things that I value about personal accountability, and it was empowering to know that, I could be in control of my health. And so, yeah, I just became obsessed with root cause medicine, food as medicine, and learning how to heal the body by paying attention to inflammation. Because inflammation is oxidation. That's what damages us. Eating food, breathing, just being alive, we're always constantly combating oxidation. And that's what drives pathologies, to include the mind, and I wanted nothing more than to feel solid again. When I got out of the military, I was a staff sergeant training snipers. I loved my job. I felt like I was thriving.
Would you say you had a lot of sound food in those MREs?
No.
Were
No.
you going through the chow line, or you're like, oh man, the molecular biology here is on point. I'm feeling so well nourished, and I'm not inflamed at all.
Yeah, what do they say? Pain is MRE leaving the bodies. No, and there's been like new headlines that come out that they're loaded with heavy metals and all kinds of junk, which doesn't surprise me. But yeah, and kind of going back, like after spending years studying all this stuff, it still really did. It took me a while to actually truly implement it. I don't know why. I there was things that I knew and understood for 6 years, and I was just, had some kind of excuse for not doing it. But once I finally did begin to apply, everything that I knew, because I had no choice, honestly. Like my mental health was so bad. I was having panic attacks, going in and out of relationships that were not good for me, and learning a lot about myself, a lot about trauma that I had, some of it from the military, a lot of it from childhood. And I think developing some awareness around that really helped me move forward too.
I think when people sit down with anything, whether like you go to basketball practice and you learn some new drills, or you learned new information on the molecular biology level, if you don't answer the question, now what? Like, what do you do with that? So do I kind of implement anything? And so it's not the knowledge, it's not the goal. Tim Ferriss has said goals are for losers, systems are for winners. So yes, I've learned this. If people, I think they just go from next task to next task because, well, I know I've done that, and I don't sit there and stop and answer the question, now what? Do I want to implement this? I've learned box breathing. Do I want to implement that? Cold therapy. Do I want to implement that? Yes. Okay. What does that take? Do I need to pay for a tub? Do I need to have it in my garage? If it's just a tub of water, what's going to be grown in that here in a few weeks? If it's going to be cleaned out or not? So once you learn something and you put a system in place, then you're making choices. And as Jocko would say, there's no choices. There's only consequences or trade-offs. I chose alcohol versus lemonade. I chose dinner versus drinking my dinner. I chose this relationship or not. I chose to get up and work out. I chose to get up and work out at 6 or at 5 in the morning or whatever. So, or I could sleep in. So there's always just these trade-offs. And it comes down to the system can you put in place. And if you put something in there that's repeatable, but also one that you can critique, hey, this is my system, it's in place. My car is a system, it's in place. It seems that whenever it's low on fuel, I need to add fuel. I got to adjust my system. After so many miles, I got to change my tires. When you have your system in place, just constantly tweak it systematically. Not just every day, right? I'm tweaking every day. That gets a little annoying and not sustainable. But once a week, once a month, just keep checking your system with you and yourself and your coach. Then you got a shot. That way you're constantly progressing. Because to your point about, I have depression. You don't. Your system in place is to keep you depressed, right? If you're grieving, your system in place is to keep you grieving until you make some other choices to reframe your mindset, focus on something else, focus on improving. And like even when we work with that 22-0 project, which it's a military project where they're just working with vets trying to get to 22 daily suicides, which actually is a much higher number, down to 0. When the vets are talking to their coaches or counselors, they don't relive the trauma. They don't go through it again because then it just hurts them more, right? They're reliving it, and it also hurts the counselor. They're working on reframing your focus onto something else immediately, right? I'm not saying we're going to bury it and not address it, but you can sit there and be woe is me all the time with my situation, my job, my relationship, my health, my obesity or whatever, until you put a system in place. And so my advocacy is stop moving for one day, for 1 hour or whatever. Take a look around and say, hey man, what's not working? Who should I talk to? Should I put something in place? I think people get on this zombie mindset. Next thing you know, 10 years are gone. Same thing, Groundhog Day.
One of the so in functional medicine, I don't mean to keep putting in plugs for functional medicine, but there's a lot of functional medicine practitioners use this what's called a 5R protocol for healing the gut. And the first R stands for removing obstacles to healing. So, when you're looking at somebody who's experienced a lot of trauma, has had a lot of toxic environmental exposures, so for veterans, it could be MREs, it could be leadership, it could be deployments, it could be shoot houses, heavy metal toxicity. It could be a lot of dysbiosis in the gut from poor diet. So there's a lot of things that are going on that are working against folks. And you don't have to be a veteran for this to be true. If you're consuming a standard American diet, all of this is relevant. But so I like to begin with, focusing on what are the obstacles that are standing in your way that we can remove that'll make everything a lot easier for you, right? Because if your body is inflamed, so is your brain, right? If you've got insulin resistance going on, your brain is also experiencing insulin resistance. And when that's going on, your brain cells can't make the energy they need to do their normal functioning, like clean themselves or fire appropriately, respond to neurotransmitters and things like that. Then it starts to have deleterious effects. This is like they refer to, dementia is kind of like type 3 diabetes. But, you can look at that on a little bit less serious scales, like to where understanding that those things are going to impact your ability to handle stress, period, right? Your ability to respond to adversity appropriately. Because when you're super stressed out, whether that be cognitively, psychologically, your appraisal of the situation causes you to experience stress, or if it's physical stress from damage, right? Like eating like shit, drinking too much, having excessive oxidation going on in your body. Both of those things are going to significantly impact your ability to have those thoughts, to move through that adversity with grace and speed like we all want to. So, I tell people all the time, like, you can't necessarily think your way out of it always, right? So I think it's a good way to start, is like getting people to start healing their body, and then some of those things kind of start to come online, and be a lot more manageable, and that's where we start to share some of the tools. Like I'm sure you use with a lot of your athletes, things like box breathing, healthy coping strategies, stuff like that, and really curating that environment to support their goals. Going back to something else you were saying earlier, one of the things that I think helps folks with sustaining these efforts over time is connecting it with their values. One of the first things I do with everybody that I work with is a values exercise. They actually stole from Brene Brown. You know what I'm talking about? Shame, vulnerability researcher. She did a famous TED Talk.
Uh-uh. I did something similar with.
It's a very simple exercise. Basically, it's a long list of words that could be your values, things like discipline, honesty, integrity, family, love, empathy, good character. And so I have people, spend some time listing out their top 5 values, in order from 1 to 5, and then take a hard look at their life and see, are you actually living in accordance with those values? And a lot of times we're not. And so I think it's super helpful to keep that top of mind and develop our self-awareness around what's important to us. Because when I looked at, at this point in my life, for the last probably at least 10 years, I do eat pretty healthy, and it's not hard for me to do that. I know that is kind of unusual in at least the United States. And so, I've thought about why is it easier for me to do that? And I think it really just does boil down to values. When I'm consuming food, generally I'm thinking like, is this something that is going to cause damage to my body or support me? Is this going to be fuel, nutrition? It's going to help my brain work, because I've been to the place where I've been suicidal and depressed and just living in darkness for weeks on end, white knuckling it through life. So I want to do everything that I can, everything that I'm in control of, whether that be the way that I think about situations, how I choose to respond to other people, to adversity, what I choose to put in my body, and just kind of increasing that agency, if you will. Which is why I always say fasting is kind of the gateway drug to being in charge of yourself, because it forces you to interface with your hedonistic impulse, that like craving and hunger that you get with stuff. You try to make excuses like, oh, it's just this one thing, or this isn't going to matter. But when you show up for yourself and do what you said you're going to do day in and day out, it strengthens that muscle, that self-discipline muscle. And that's not everything. Willpower can only get you so far. We kind of talked about that a little bit yesterday. Habits, having non-negotiables in place, are helpful too. But yeah.
Well, let me ask you this. So, just top of your list then, what's your number one value you strive to live by? Just number one. What's the word?
Probably being kind. Kindness, vulnerability.
Those are 2 different words. They're completely different.
Yeah, I know.
So kindness is number one. So kindness is number one. I had to do the same exercise. I used a business book, Gino Wickman with Traction is the name of the book, and it walks you through how do you set up your business and think about all the different components. And it's very, very helpful. Shout out David Mann, private equity guy, Naval Academy grad, just liaison to the president, who told me about that and said, hey, Jim, you need to read this book and implement everything. So I did a retreat by myself with this book in the cabin, and I'm going through all these exercises and learning this stuff. And one of them was, what is your business? So I run a gym. What's the gym's core value? So for me, the first one was integrity. And it was just do your best. And You don't need to have a lot of rules. Like when you have Congress with millions of rules, it's because someone's usually broken one of them. But if you have 5 or 6 standards, then the rule kind of encompasses everything. So like conduct unbecoming a Marine is just one rule that basically, if anyone breaks it, they could be in trouble. Like doing all the other rules get broken too when you break that one rule. So am I acting in integrity all the time? No way. No chance, right? Plenty of flaws, plenty of sins. But trying to do my best was my first one. What's your second one, Jim? You said vulnerability?
Yeah, ability. That's that. Honestly, that was kind of like one of the first like big aha moments I had after being out of the military. There was a very specific moment that happened to me. I was in college studying science at Bowling Green State University,
In
and
Ohio?
I had started experiencing, some pretty bad PTSD symptoms. I was going through a divorce with my wife of 10 years. And it sucked. But my little brother, who's 6 years younger than me, funny story, he was actually in basic training when I was at Fort Benning teaching sniper school, and I knew some of his drill sergeants. So I got to go down there and mess with him a little bit. But he immediately went to Afghanistan. And, I had been out for a little while and starting to experience the impacts of the, stress of combat. And I never wanted for him to ever experience anything like that. I wanted him to have like the most boring deployment in the world. And then I got a phone call that, from their family readiness group that their patrol had been attacked, and they said that he was fine. They thought that's how it always goes. It's any veteran will tell you that's been deployed. Like they'll call your wife while you're out and like, oh yeah, somebody got hit. We don't know who it was, but yeah, we'll let you know when we hear more. And then it's
Perfect.
2 weeks before you can get back to the base to let her know that you're okay. Well, so I had just got that phone call, and then my roommate at the time was watching some movie, and there was a scene there that just kind of triggered me, and I started having a panic attack in my front lawn. I like went outside, like sobbing, snot pouring out of my face, and I couldn't stop for. I mean, it was probably 45 minutes. I was out there, just kind of like on my hands and knees, and I noticed myself starting to get really angry, just pissed off that I was feeling this way, and my thoughts were immediately going to like, I want to go back in, or, I could have taken jobs, for companies like Triple Canopy, Blackwater, doing similar stuff for the State Department overseas and making good money. And so I was like thinking, why is that coming up right now? And I realized that I wanted to go back into that because it was easier. It was easier than facing what I was facing in that moment, I was good at it. I didn't have to deal with all this feelings bullshit. And I could just go do that. But I knew it was a cop-out.
Wasn't there a little bit of a
And
revenge piece there too? If your brother is in harm's way or gets killed, like you want to go back and inflict pain?
no,
No? Okay.
no, I don't think it was that. I think, that situation just kind of like elevated my emotional fragility, if you will, at the moment. But no, I was just, I was afraid of vulnerability. Like that kind of became this theme that I noticed when I first got out because I was pretty emotionally numb. Probably from training, from combat, from my childhood. I was really good at compartmentalizing things. So whenever my safety or vulnerability was threatened, I became like a robot. Like you can't even touch me right now. Which sounds great, but in in
It's a, de-
relationship with people that you
it's
care
a,
about. When you can't even access your emotions, it's not good, you know?
it's just a defense
So,
mechanism because you're worried about being left or abandoned or alone.
absolutely. Yeah, so that was, one of the first things that I began to focus on is like I wanted to select for my ability to be vulnerable, embrace it, lead with that. And that was a big part of my healing journey. And to this point now, I really truly believe that, especially as a leader, that vulnerability is a form of leadership. Because you're demonstrating the kind of behavior that you want your employees or staff to be able feel comfortable at being. It helps you work through problems in the workplace more effectively.
The main thing there when you're leading like on a team and why being vulnerable is a leadership quality is because it builds trust. If you're supposedly always perfect, everyone knows that's not true. That's not true. So if you're always trying to act like you're perfect and I know it's not true, then you're lying to me at some point, right? You're selling me something that's not true. So then I don't trust you as much because you just lied to me. If you say, hey, this is my best guess, here's why, here's what we're doing, could be wrong. Or whenever you do make a mistake, well, man, shoot, that was a fuck up. All right, that was bad. So you show that you're not above making mistakes, but you also point out that, hey, this is the mistake, and now we're correcting it immediately. When you guys make mistakes, we want to correct them immediately. Don't hide them because then we're in the second iteration of being on the wrong path. So that being vulnerable creates tremendous trust because, hey, man, I'm not perfect, but we're still going to be striving. It enables other people to be imperfect. No one's worried about that. Lets them play more loose, lets them play fast, if you will, because it makes sense.
Kind of like the cold plunge for your brain,
Yeah,
right? 'Cause
right.
like when you intentionally jack up your adrenaline hormones by jumping into cold water when everything's fine, you're not psychologically being stressed, by something, then you're starting to teach your body like it's okay to feel all of this adrenaline and it not be a threat, right? So I think putting in those reps of vulnerability allows you to um, be open to experiencing love, which is very healing.
My second core value was discipline. So we want integrity, doing your best, discipline, doing it all the time, even when you don't want to. Third one was teamwork. No one gets there alone. So I want to do my best all the time and get those around me better and utilize them to get me better for whatever my mission is in life, whether it's a relationship, training, strength and conditioning athletes, CrossFitters, powerlifters, football players, whatever. Do you have any other words that are on your core value list? Because mine are at top of mind. They're painted on the wall in my gym. They're on my license plate, wrapped around it. They're on my signature and some of my emails.
Man, I have a lot actually.
You said four or
uh,
five. I have six plus a overall theme, but um,
well, it's just like throughout my life, I've collected these concepts that have become so important to me that I try to keep top of mind, so that way I don't lose sight of reality. One of those things is that life is full of choices. Everything is a choice. Um, our life is a perfect historical record of the choices that we've made, which is a reflection of our own self worth and what we believe what we're capable of. But yeah, I think keeping that, staying cognizant of the fact that everything's a choice is a big one. Um,
I can tell you what my next one is. It's Kaizen.
Kaizen, yeah.
Integrity is doing your best, and discipline is doing it all the time. But if I'm doing my best with a teammate to get better at basketball, and we're just simply running around the table while I'm doing my best and running as hard as I can, and I'm doing it all the time when I'm supposed to, running around the table. I'm doing it with my teammate. I'm probably still not getting better, right? I'm working hard,
Right.
but I'm just running around the table. I'm not getting any better at basketball, right? So there has to be a Kaizen approach, which is the mantra for Toyota. a Japanese term, which means you're looking for constant improvement in every little thing, little things here and there. So I always reference James Clear's Atomic Habits book about Kaizen, and Tony Robbins has it on like chapter 3 of Awaken the Giant Within, two outstanding manuals for anyone trying to just be somewhat better at anything. So you got to at least try to get better at things, right? Not just, hey, I'm working hard, running around a table like an idiot. The last two is enjoyment. You got to have to like what you're doing, right? I could be great at basketball. You know what? I was great at the trombone in middle school. Didn't speak to me at all, but I was like, hey, I'm cool at this. Like, I'm really, hey, you should be doing something. I'm like, I think trombone's kind of dorky, like even too dorky for me, and I'm a big dork. So I'm, not about that life going into high school. So I was good at it, but you have to enjoy what you're doing, because if you really like it, there's a lot of bullshit to being good at basketball, like running suicides, right? There's a lot of pain of doing some of the things that no one wants to do, even the ones that love basketball. So you have to enjoy it a little bit. And the last piece is Sisu, a word from Finland. The mantra for the entire country was the first tattoo I got on my arm. And it was just when you're at your end of your rope, when you're suicidal, when you're looking at addiction, when you're looking at any form of quitting, you just hang on and don't quit. So that's in my assessment, that's the survival version of Sisu, just holding on and don't quit. The winner's version of Sisu is when you're running those sprints, you run through the line, you don't quit. You do everything to the end and then more. When other people are doing, hey, we're doing 100 push-ups, you're doing 102. Everything you do plus 2. So that's not quitting on the exercise or your teammate, right? So the longer I can not quit on the getting better stuff, it means I'm going to progress faster because I held on and didn't quit longer. And then once I read Tim Grover's book, Relentless, I'm like, well, shit, man, you can only have 3 or 4 words, otherwise it gets kind of convoluted. But the word relentless is what he applies to everything. So I'm just trying to apply those 6 words relentlessly as best I can, knowing that every day I'm coming up short. I just want to live within that standard. So those are my 6 words plus relentless, and that's the deal.
I really like that book. There was, I actually got a really good takeaway from that book. He was talking about training Kobe Bryant and channeling your inner dark side.
Mm-hmm.
And what he was referring to as Kobe's inner dark side was not something that I personally could relate to. But I had just pretty recently had started my last business building permaculture systems. And I found myself, I had built this big orchard and a creek to handle stormwater runoff. And I had to build a small little vehicle bridge to get across, about a 25-foot vehicle bridge to get across this creek. I've never built a vehicle bridge before, And so with my nerd brain, I'm studying I-beam theory and trying to figure out, do all the math to make sure that what I was designing and building, an F-250 could drive across. And I don't know. I kept finding myself second guessing myself over and over again. But then I started thinking about that book, and all of a sudden what Tim Grover was saying in there made a lot of sense to me. I was like, because my inner dark side is, I'm not afraid to, and the easiest way for me to explain it, I'm not afraid to get in the car with strangers. Because I can fucking handle myself. I'll put I've done it. I was a sniper in the Army. I'd go out with a couple other guys and march off into danger, and it's because I trust my own ability to get me through it, so I'm not saying, hey, we should all go hop in cars with strangers, but it's that tenacity, that lack of fear to go off and try to do something that I'm not really sure how to do, and I'm not going to let that get in my way of doing it. And so that was like a cool moment for me, because I'm like, that's what he was talking about,
I think what's great about that book or another book, or you read the Bible, it's, there's what's written, and there's how someone interprets it, and there's how someone else, interprets it. Some people might interpret that when you're embracing your dark side is that, hey, sometimes I get mad as hell if I'm losing, which then causes me to focus more. And I don't need to be sit there raging like Darth Vader, all hate all the time. But sometimes I get mad, and it does help me focus. For others, maybe your dark side is that you've had enough reps where you've been in life-threatening situations, and you're trained enough that you can physically handle yourself with your hands or weapons. So you can handle things like that, or the fear of the unknown. So making that bridge that your 250 can drive over. Me, I leverage the teamwork core value I have, and I'm like, I'm gonna call someone else who's better at making a bridge and say, hey, you go make that bridge, I'll pay you this. I'm gonna do something else that I'm better at. I don't
Yeah.
want to. I'm not great at everything. I'm only great at a couple things, and those things are real small. I don't know if I'm even great, but I'm definitely not great at building things. But yeah, could I get the books out? Could I take the YouTube videos? Could I have someone, next thing you know, everything's going great until my truck is halfway in the river, so
Well, it's especially when it comes to business, it's like business is absolutely the hardest thing I've ever done. I've crashed and burned. I've been pushed to tears because I wasn't sure if I was going to make payroll in 3 days for all these guys that I cared so much about.
sure.
Um, it can be really really hard, but just kind of embracing the idea of just leaning in to. 'Cause in my experience, as long as you just like it's kind of like when you're running. When you go for a run, you kind of like have that just enough lean to keep you having to take another step forward.
That's the idea, yeah.
That's, I think that that's a good way to approach life and business is like, because once you start leaning in, you don't want to lean back because those opportunities are going to keep coming, you know? And if you start second guessing yourself and getting scared and back off, then those opportunities are going to pass you by. So
Well, when you're
that's
when you're training yourself, either in the weight room or you're going on a long ruck march or just doing things that are physical, what do you listen to?
you're probably going to laugh at me, but if it's like running, where there's like a kind of cadence to it, I really like EDM.
Okay,
For some reason, when I'm listening to EDM when I'm running, like I'm not paying attention to my breathing at all, and I seem to just like not get tired. Like I don't focus on it, and then as it picks up, I run faster, and I kind of enjoy that. But if I'm lifting heavy, some usually some kind of like metal or something. I'm like was born in '86, so I like a wide range of music. From heavy metal hair bands and to stuff like August Burns Red, Children of Bodom, some Swedish speed metal.
when I sometimes when I run outside, back when I was in my running days, a lot of times I listen to nothing, especially if I'm in the woods. If I'm on the road, I usually listen to whatever. Lately, when I lift, I just listen to country. I just stay kind of calm while I'm pushing. If there's a moment where this next piece is really aggressive, and there's a few songs I'll listen to specifically, and something that was heavy or intense or tremendous pain. So otherwise, I'm just kind of just staying in my head. A lot of times when I lift, I've listened to nothing, just being my own thoughts. Or talk to my training partner. What's a bucket list adventure you haven't done yet you want to do?
Probably do some. I would like to travel through Indonesia quite a bit. Like go from the south to the north. I'm a huge foodie person. I love food. There's probably more diversity in their chow than anywhere else. Um, so that'd be pretty cool. Doesn't have to just be there, but Asia in general. Um, I would also like to, man. So I decided to go into Ranger Regiment as a 14-year-old because my uncle Paul that died when I was 14, he loved Army Rangers, and I was being groomed to go into the Air Force and become a fighter pilot. Still kind of wish I would have done that, but he saw that. He was like, you don't have to do that, right? And he sat me down and showed me this book about Rangers, and he just thought they were so cool. And when he passed, I decided to honor him by going that route.
Gotcha. Do
Um,
you have a sports movie you like?
Sports movie. Does racing count?
Yeah, for sure.
What's that? What's that new movie that came out? Well, kind of new,
Formula One.
where not the one with Brad Pitt, the other one with the kid, um, where they let
Okay.
him compete to become a Formula One racer.
I don't know. I have to see
It
that.
was Gran Torino, or not Gran Torino.
Definitely
What's the
not
name of
Gran
that game?
Turismo.
Um, Gran Turismo.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
Yeah,
How
yeah, yeah.
about I know you don't watch sports that much. Is there a sport that you would watch?
Rugby. I actually really like rugby a lot. I played. That was the last sport I played. I played up until
Did you play a BG?
probably about 4 or 5 years ago. I separated my shoulder. I have a torn labrum still, um, and I tried to work through it, and it just every time I'd spear somebody into the ground, I was putting my shoulder back in the socket. So
When you went to BG, was it the one in Ohio?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Almost everyone in my family went there except for me. I went to Purdue. We're all from born and raised in Cleveland. So
It's a
BG
great
is,
school. It was a great place to study science, honestly.
and they have a really good rugby team. And
Yeah.
so the Haka, do you know what that is?
Uh huh.
The Haka is the All
Yeah.
Black chant
Yep.
before their rugby matches. So that's the English and the native language version of the Haka I have written out on the wall in the gym.
Nice.
It's pretty sweet.
I
Do you
was
have an
literally
athlete
just
you
showing that to my wife a few days ago because I don't know. I saw something on the internet that reminded me of it. It's
I,
vicious.
I watched this Polynesian country's high school. It's a private school, and one of their main teachers that all the student body loved passed away. And so, in the funeral procession that day, when they're in the hearse, cars are proceeding. That hearse and the other cars along with it proceed from the ceremony into the parking lot at the high school grounds. All the students are out there from like I think it's middle school and high school in their uniforms. So there's hundreds of students out there surrounding the driveway as this hearse pulls in, and those kids lead off with the haka. It's
Nice.
not just for New Zealand, right? All Blacks. It's for the country and other Polynesian countries as well. So this hearse is pulling in and it stops, and they perform the entire thing. And when they're done, then the hearse proceeds to its final destination. Do you have an athlete you like? And if not, it's okay.
Alex Rogers. I went. Me and Chris went and saw him fight out in Long Beach not too long ago. That was fun.
Nice. How about
Yeah.
you have a book you recommend?
Yes. Probably. Probably the book that I recommend the most to people is by Dr. Alberto Villoldo. It's called Grow a New Body. He actually just put out a new one called Grow a New Brain. I haven't read it yet, but for anybody that's like, interested in mastering, their biology through fasting and nutrition and all that stuff, excellent book. And plus, if you never heard of him before, he's a psychiatrist, medical anthropologist, and trained shaman. He spent probably 30 years or so at this point traveling to Peru and studying under the tutelage of their shamans. And he's got several books, but in that book, he introduces the subject or topic of shamanic soul journeying. And out of all the different types of therapy that I've been through, I think a lot of it has to do because, very intellectual, analytical type brain, where I'm like, figure out what it is and try to fix it. Well, like, when it comes to matters of the psyche, like, that's not how it works. You can't just, like, use your thinking brain to fix it. And so, shamanic soul journeying is just this, this series of meditations, this practice, and it becomes this, like, sort of esoteric, like, process that dismantles your ability to try to think your way out of it. Um,
Gotcha.
it's this, like, kind of methodical process where you can literally, as like a third party, observe parts of your psyche, and it's a system to revisit those. And what he refers to as soul contracts, like absolute ways of thinking that we developed, from things that happened to us in childhood. Cognitive behavioral therapy sort of mimics this in a way where they talk about stuck points. Um, Anyways, awesome book. After reading that book, I immediately started incorporating fasting into my life. Um, I had heard about it, and I was like, I wonder if this is cool. I experienced pretty much a complete transformation the first time that I pretty much followed that book to a T. I didn't buy all the supplement recommendations, which aren't really required.
Gotcha. Okay. Couple left. What's your favorite lift?
My favorite lift, probably either deadlifts or squats.
Okay. Do you have a quote for us?
A quote? Yes. My favorite quote is by Nelson Mandela. After I got out of the military, trying to just wrap my head around civilian life, this one really stood out to me. And he said, to be free is not merely to cast off one's chains, but to live in a manner that enhances the freedom of everyone around you. And, as somebody that, grew up learning unconventional warfare and valuing free agency and autonomy, that just kind of became sort of my moral compass, right? It's a very binary way to think about it. Like, I don't want to take away from somebody else's freedom with my actions or decisions.
Gotcha. Where can people find you?
I'm on social media, LinkedIn, James Artman. I do the majority of my writing there. It's kind of a creative outlet for me. I don't post a lot other places. You can also find me at our website at extremeresilience.net. We do have a school community as well, Hero University. And pretty soon, I'm almost finished building an app called Pulse that will be a pretty comprehensive fitness and coaching marketplace app.
Nice.
We'll be putting that out soon.
Well, James, man, I really enjoyed it. Learned a lot today. I appreciate the whole time and conversation. That time well spent, plenty of value there. So, thanks so much. For those who want to continue to email us, info@athlete-builder.com. Again, we're powered by the AEA Institute. So, all your mental performance training, when you're talking about putting a system in place to improve your mental performance, well, I have that. So, get a hold of me for that. Jim, man, appreciate it so much, man. Have a good one.
Yeah, you too, Jim.
See ya.
All right, see you.